Quinn Farlow was pretty sure his daughter's daycare teacher had set him up on a pity date. He wiped his hands on his jeans, standing awkwardly outside the rooftop restaurant that looked way too expensive for someone who barely scraped by as a mechanic. The view of downtown Los Angeles glittered behind him, and the valet had looked at his beat-up Honda Civic like it might fall apart in the driveway. "I swear, if this is one of those we thought you needed to get out more setups, I'm walking out," he muttered, adjusting the collar of the only button-down shirt he owned. "Quinn," came a soft voice behind him. He turned and froze. She was stunning. Tall, elegant. Long dark hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail, eyes bright and curious, lips painted in a soft red that somehow made his chest tighten. Her dress was simple but hugged her figure like it had been designed just for her. She didn't look like someone who'd be set up with a broke single dad. "I'm Zaria," she said, offering her hand. He blinked, then took it, his calloused fingers brushing her soft skin. "Quinn, yeah, nice to meet you," she smiled, and something in his chest shifted. Before he could say anything else, a couple approached them, his friend Devin and a woman he didn't know. Devin clapped him on the back. "This is my girlfriend Leela, and I see you've met Zaria." Zaria leaned in slightly. "We're the double in this double date." Quinn laughed under his breath. "Guess I didn't get the memo about the dress code." "You're fine," Zaria said, eyes warm. "I like a man who doesn't pretend to be something he's not." They stepped into the restaurant and Quinn tried not to gawk. Crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, waiters in tuxedos. He'd never eaten anywhere that didn't have a drive-through. When they were seated, he caught Zaria watching him. "You okay?" she asked, just not used to this kind of place. She tilted her head. "Then we're going to make it a good first experience." He wanted to ask what she did for work, but something about her didn't scream normal job. She had that effortless grace like she'd grown up in places like this. But she didn't act stuck up. She smiled at the waiter. She asked him questions. She really laughed at his awkward jokes. By the time dessert came around, the awkwardness had melted into something easy, comfortable. "So," she said, leaning her elbow on the table, "tell me about you, other than the fact that you clearly don't go on enough dates." He chuckled. "I'm a mechanic. I run a small shop in Inglewood. It's not much, but it pays the bills, most months. And I've got a daughter, Madison. She's 6, my whole world." Zaria's expression softened. "I love that. What's she like?" "Bossy. Obsessed with unicorns and peanut butter sandwiches." "Smarter than me already." Zaria grinned. "I'd love to meet her someday." His chest tightened. Most women bolted the second he mentioned he was a single dad, but she didn't even flinch. "You don't think that's a red flag?" he asked. "I think it tells me you know how to love someone more than yourself," she said quietly. He stared at her for a long moment, completely thrown. After dinner, they stepped onto the rooftop patio, the city lights stretching out in every direction. The breeze caught her hair and she turned to him, her eyes searching his. "I had a really good time tonight," she said. He nodded, heart racing. "Me too. Honestly didn't expect it to be this." She stepped a little closer. "You thought it was going to be awkward. I thought you'd be bored. Or not into it. I'm not exactly." "Stop," she said, placing a hand on his chest. "You're exactly the kind of man I hoped I'd meet." That was the moment it happened, that shift, that pull. He leaned down, hesitated, then kissed her. It wasn't a long kiss. Just enough to make him forget the city behind them, just enough to make her breath catch. When they pulled back, she smiled. "Call me?" "Yeah," he said, dazed. "Yeah, I will." They walked down to valet together, and he braced himself for the moment she saw his car, but she didn't react. Didn't even blink when his Civic creaked to a stop beside the curb. She just turned, kissed his cheek, and whispered, "Good night, Quinn." As she walked away, a sleek black Rolls Royce pulled up beside her. A driver stepped out and opened the door. Quinn blinked. She slipped into the car like she'd done it 1,000 times and vanished into the night. He stood frozen, the realization hitting hard. What the hell kind of woman had he just kissed? And why did it feel like his whole life had just changed? Quinn stood in the middle of his garage the next morning, elbow deep in the engine of a '69 Mustang, but his thoughts weren't on the faulty carburetor. They were back on her Zaria, the way she'd looked at him, the way she'd just slipped into that high-end car like it was second nature. He hadn't asked questions last night, but now, with his hands stained with grease and the scent of motor oil thick in the air, he couldn't stop wondering who the hell she really was. Yo, boss, called Malachi, one of his junior techs from across the shop. There's a lady out front. Said she's looking for you. Quinn wiped his hands on a rag and stepped out into the front office, expecting a customer. Instead, Zaria stood there, dressed in slim black pants, a cream blouse tucked neatly at the waist, and flats that probably cost more than his week's rent. He stopped short. Zaria, she turned, and her face lit up. Morning, he blinked. You came here. I said I wanted to meet Madison, she said. You told me you bring her here after school, right? He hesitated. Yeah, but she's not here yet. Her babysitter's dropping her off around 3. Perfect, she said, settling onto the cracked vinyl couch in the waiting area like she belonged there. I've got time. You're okay just hanging out here? He asked, still stunned. She looked around at the cluttered desk, half-broken fans spinning lazily in the corner, and the chipped linoleum floor. I like seeing people in their element. You seem at home here. I am, he said after a moment. But you don't exactly look like you spend time in places like this. She tilted her head. What if I said I wanted to? You're kind of hard to figure out. Zaria smiled faintly. Then I guess you'll have to spend more time with me. Before he could respond, the bell over the front door jingled again. A small girl with wild curls barreled in, her backpack bouncing, a worn unicorn keychain swinging from the zipper. Daddy, Madison cried, launching herself into his arms. Quinn caught her, lifting her as she wrapped her arms tightly around his neck. Hey, Peanut, how was school? Boring. But guess what? I drew a picture of a flying hamster and my teacher put it on the board. Flying hamster, huh? That's elite artwork. Madison pulled back, noticing Zaria. Her eyes narrowed in suspicion. Who's that? Quinn set her down. This is Zaria. She's my friend. Zaria knelt. Hi, Madison. I've heard a lot about you. Madison crossed her arms. Did my dad tell you about the time I ate 5 cinnamon rolls in one sitting? Zaria's eyes widened. No, but that sounds like a story I need to hear. Madison studied her for a second, then nodded once. Okay, you can sit next to me. Zaria grinned and sat on the couch beside her. Quinn watched, stunned, as his daughter launched into a dramatic retelling of her bakery conquest, complete with hand gestures and exaggerated sound effects. Zaria hung onto every word. By the time Madison had finished her story, she had declared Zaria approved. She's cool, Daddy, Madison said solemnly, grabbing a juice box from the mini fridge. You should keep her. Zaria laughed softly. High praise. Quinn felt something twist inside his chest. Watching the two of them together was surreal, but it also felt dangerously like something he could get used to. Later that evening, after Madison was picked up by her babysitter and the garage was locked up, Zaria lingered outside beside her car, a sleek white coupe with tinted windows and a subtle emblem he didn't recognize. Thanks for letting me meet her, she said, tucking her hands into her coat pockets. She liked you, he said, leaning against the hood of his Civic. That's rare. Zaria looked at him for a long moment. So, can I take you somewhere tomorrow night? He raised an eyebrow. You want to take me out? I do, she said. You've already shown me your world. Let me show you mine, he hesitated. I don't own a suit. You won't need one, she said, but bring your curiosity. The next evening, he stood in front of a tall set of iron gates, equal parts awe and suspicion rolling through him. Zaria had sent a driver to pick him up, an actual driver, in a car that didn't even make noise when it started. The ride had ended here, a villa nestled into the hills, its architecture modern and sprawling, glass and stone blending into the landscape like something out of an architectural magazine. The gates opened, and the driver gestured for him to step through alone. He followed a stone path lined with flickering lanterns until he reached the entrance, where Zaria waited. She wore a floor-length navy gown, her hair swept up, a pair of diamond earrings catching the light. She looked like royalty, and he, in his button-down and jeans, felt like a fraud. I thought you said no suit, he said, eyeing her warily. You look perfect, she said, offering her hand. He took it, and she led him inside. The house was unreal. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the city. A grand piano sat in the corner, untouched. Sculptures dotted the hallways. And on the far end of the room, a long dining table was set for 2. You live here? He asked, stunned. Zaria turned to him. I do. The reality hit him like a freight train. You're rich, he said slowly. Like actually rich, she met his gaze. Yes, he took a step back. Why didn't you tell me? Because I needed to know if you saw me, not the money. Quinn ran a hand through his hair. Zaria, this is insane. You live in a place like this, and I literally had to borrow gas money last week. Do you think I care? You should, he snapped, his voice louder than he intended. You should care because people like you don't end up with people like me. She crossed the room slowly. That's not true. You don't get it. I'm raising a kid on my own. I'm running a shop that could shut down any month. I've got nothing to offer you. You have more than any man I've ever met, she said quietly. You're loyal, honest, you don't pretend. That matters more than money ever could. Quinn stared at her. Everything inside him was screaming to walk away, to protect himself, to keep from getting pulled into a world he didn't belong in. But then she reached up and touched his face, her thumb brushing his jaw. I'm not asking you to change, Quinn, she whispered. I'm asking you to let me in, he swallowed hard. You're making this really difficult. Good, she said, stepping even closer. Because I don't want easy, I want real. He didn't kiss her this time. He just stood there, heart racing, wondering how the hell this woman, this billionaire, had walked into his garage and turned his entire world upside down. Quinn had never been on a yacht before. He tried not to look too stunned as the sleek vessel sliced through the water, its white frame glinting beneath the dying sunset. The marina had been quiet when Zaria's driver dropped him off, but the moment he'd stepped aboard, the quiet had been replaced with soft jazz, chilled champagne, and staff that addressed Zaria by name. Zaria stood near the edge of the deck, hair swept back by the wind, a loose white blouse tucked into wide-leg linen trousers. She wasn't wearing shoes. Her toes curled against the polished teak flooring like she was more comfortable here than anywhere else in the world. Quinn approached slowly, still uncertain what to do with his hands or the knot in his gut. You said you wanted to show me something, he said. She turned slightly, her eyes on the horizon. I wanted to see how far you'd let this go before you ran. He didn't answer right away. The water stretched out endlessly ahead of them, painted in gold and lavender by the sinking sun. I'm still here, he finally said. Not sure what that means yet. Zaria looked at him. You think all of this is about the money, isn't it? No, she stepped closer. It's about what I've built. What I've protected, and what I've never let anyone else inside of. Quinn searched her face. Why me? Because you don't ask for anything from me, because you're not impressed by any of this. Because when you look at me, I feel like a person, not a prize. He exhaled, tension running from his shoulders. You make it sound easy. It's not. I've had people try to marry me to get close to my father's holdings. I've had entire relationships built on leverage. You're the first person who didn't Google me before our second meeting. Quinn leaned on the railing beside her. I didn't even know your last name until yesterday. Zaria laughed under her breath. And yet you still kissed me. He glanced at her. Kinder reckless, wasn't it? Or honest? The boat slowed, engines softening to a hum. They were far from shore now, the glow of the city behind them fading into a haze. Zaria turned and gestured for him to follow her below deck. He hesitated, then moved after her. The interior was just as stunning, clean lines, neutral colors, understated elegance. Not a single thing about the space was ostentatious, but everything was clearly custom. It smelled like cedar and salt water. She led him into a lounge with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the open sea. A low table was set with covered dishes, flickering candles, and 2 crystal glasses. I had them prepare something for us, she said, lifting one of the lids to reveal seared scallops and a saffron risotto. You hungry? I'm always hungry, he replied, sitting slowly. But this is about 10 levels above the burger place I usually hit after work. I figured I'd raise the bar. As they ate, the quiet between them stretched comfortably. Quinn watched her across the table, noting the way she cut her food with precise ease, the way her eyes flicked up when he said something funny, the way she leaned in just slightly when he talked about Madison's obsession with pirate stories. When they finished, she poured more wine and pushed her plate away. I want to ask you something, she said. He leaned back. Shoot. What would you do if you had the money? He blinked. What, if there were no limits, no bills, no debt, what would you do? He stared down into his glass. I'd buy the land next to my shop, expand it, hire more guys, pay them what they're worth. I'd make it a place where people could actually build something, not just survive. Zaria said nothing. And I'd buy Madison a telescope, he added quietly. She's been obsessed with space lately. Keeps asking if the moon has a back door. Zaria smiled, but there was something unreadable in her eyes. You think like a builder, Quinn looked at her. What about you? You've already got it all. Not everything, she said, her voice low. I've built an empire alone, I've protected it. But you can't share your victories with a boardroom. He waited, sensing she wasn't finished. My mother died when I was 13, she said. My father threw himself into acquisitions and forgot how to hold a conversation that didn't involve projections. I've spent the last 15 years proving I could run his company better than any man he tried to replace me with. Quinn's tone softened. You ever stop, just breathe, she looked at him. Only when I'm with you. They were quiet again, the room filled with the gentle rock of the boat and the distant call of seabirds. Zaria stood and walked to the window. Come here. He joined her, and she pointed to a small island in the distance. I bought it last year. Haven't even been out there yet. You bought an island and never visited it, she shrugged. I didn't have a reason to, Quinn tilted his head. And now, Zaria turned to him. Now I do, his heart pounded. Something in her voice had shifted, more vulnerable, more certain. You're serious. I want to show you that I'm not just a name in a headline, she said. I want you to see the parts of my life I don't show anyone, he swallowed. You're not afraid this is all too fast. I'm afraid if I wait too long, you'll talk yourself out of this. He looked down. I already almost did. Zaria stepped closer, her hand brushing his. But you didn't? No, then maybe that's enough. He let out a slow breath. I don't know where this is going. Neither do I, she said. But I haven't wanted to find out with anyone in a very long time. Quinn looked into her eyes. They weren't guarded now. They were wide open. He reached up, gently tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Is that island close enough to get to tonight? Zaria smiled, softer than before. It is. Then let's go. She didn't answer. She just took his hand and led him back up to the deck, toward something neither of them could name, yet something weightless, untethered, and completely real. The island rose out of the sea like a secret untouched, wind-swept, and completely silent except for the waves curling against the rocks. Quinn stood barefoot on the sand, watching the horizon turn a deep violet as the last stretch of daylight vanished. The yacht was anchored just offshore, its lights a soft halo in the dark. Behind him, Zaria had lit a small fire in a stone pit nestled between two palm trees. She sat cross-legged on a blanket, her knees pulled up, her hair loose and tangled from the wind. He walked back toward her, the sand cool beneath his feet, and sat beside her. You ever think about leaving it all behind? He asked. She didn't look away from the flames. More than anyone would believe. He leaned back on his hands. Then why haven't you? I used to think stepping away would mean I lost, that if I didn't hold onto everything I built with both hands, someone would take it. Quinn glanced at her. And now, she turned to him. Now I think I've been holding on so tightly, there's been no room for anything else. The fire crackled between them. The air smelled of salt and wood smoke. Above, the stars were brighter than he'd ever seen, scattered across the sky like a map no one had finished drawing. He picked up a shell near his foot and turned it over in his palm. You know what's weird? I never imagined something like this, not once, not even in the far corners of my imagination. Zaria's voice was quiet. Do you wish you hadn't met me? He looked at her sharply. No, not even a little. I keep waiting for the moment where I wake up and realize I've made it all up. She reached across the blanket and took his hand. Then let's do something to make it real, he raised an eyebrow. Like what? Come with me to the board meeting next week. His brow furrowed. A board meeting. I have one every quarter. It's mostly suits and posturing, but this time I want them to see someone who doesn't care about quarterly margins or mergers. Someone who reminds me why I took control in the first place. He hesitated. You want me in that room? I want you beside me, not as a prop, as a partner. He swallowed hard, the weight of her words settling in his chest. I don't own a watch that doesn't come from a gas station. You don't need one, she whispered. Quinn stared at her, the fire reflecting in her eyes. He'd spent years thinking he had to keep his world small to protect it, but maybe small wasn't the same as safe. The next morning, they returned to the mainland. Quinn dropped Madison off at school, explaining vaguely that he had something important that day. She kissed his cheek, told him to fix important car things, and skipped toward the front doors without a second glance. He stood outside Zaria's building an hour later, trying not to stare at the mirrored glass stretching 30 stories into the sky. He'd never stepped into a corporate tower in his life, let alone one that bore her family's name etched in silver across the front. Inside, the elevator climbed in silence. Zaria stood beside him in a navy pantsuit, her expression unreadable. She held a single folder under her arm. Her heels clicked when she stepped out, but he followed in scuffed boots that didn't belong on a floor this polished. The boardroom was full. 12 men and women in tailored suits sat around a long marble table. Their eyes flicked to Quinn as he entered, and the temperature seemed to drop several degrees. Zaria didn't hesitate. She walked to the head of the table, placed her folder down, and introduced him. "This is Quinn Farlow," she said clearly. "He's not here to speak. He's here to remind me what this is all for." The room was silent. An older man adjusted his glasses. "Zaria, is this really the time?" "It's exactly the time," she said sharply. "We've spent years acquiring things, properties, markets, companies we'll never visit. I've been applauded for making decisions that generate profit but ignore people. That ends today." Quinn stood still, every muscle tense. Zaria's voice didn't waver. "I'm restructuring our community investments. I'm opening up funding for small business partnerships in underserved neighborhoods. Starting with a mechanic shop in Inglude that's been running on grit and loyalty for the last 8 years. Another board member leaned forward. "You're diverting funds without a vote." "I'm allocating a portion of my discretionary budget," she said. "Which, as you all know, requires no vote." Quinn's chest tightened. She was doing this for him. For the life he'd built with his own hands. After the meeting, they stepped into her office. It was quiet, glass walls, minimalist furniture, a single photograph of her mother on the bookshelf. Quinn turned to her, voice low. "You really meant all of that?" She nodded. "Every word." He stepped closer. "You didn't have to, I know," she said, "but I wanted to, because I see the way you fight for your daughter, the way you show up. And because, for once, I want to put something real above something profitable." He reached for her hand. "I've never had someone fight for me like that," she smiled. "Get used to it." 2 weeks later, the garage reopened with new tools, fresh paint, and a brand new lift installed courtesy of an anonymous donor. Quinn didn't say a word about it, but the grin on Malachi's face when he saw the upgrades was worth more than any bonus. That Friday night, Quinn stood in his tiny backyard, string lights glowing overhead, burgers sizzling on a makeshift grill. Madison chased bubbles around the grass, shrieking with laughter. Zaria sat at the patio table, barefoot, sipping lemonade from a mason jar. He walked over, handed her a plate, and sat beside her. "You sure you're okay being here?" he asked. She looked around at the mismatched chairs, the half-torn screen door, the tomato plants growing wild in the corner. "I've never been more sure of anything." He rested his arm across the back of her chair. "You know this isn't some fairy tale ending, right? This is laundry at midnight and school lunches and bills and scraped knees." Zaria looked at him. "That's exactly what I want." He leaned in, brushing his lips against hers. Madison shouted from across the yard, "You, gross." "Are you kissing again?" Zaria laughed, pulling back just enough to whisper, "Better get used to that, too." Quinn grinned as he stood, scooping Madison into his arms and swinging her through the air. Zaria watched them, eyes soft, heart full. It wasn't the kind of love story anyone would have predicted, but it was theirs. And it was just beginning. Zaria stood in front of the mirror, hands stilling at her collarbone as she fastened the final clasp of her necklace. The pendant, a small hand-etched silver star, wasn't something from a designer collection. It had arrived that morning in a plain box with a note written in confident, uneven handwriting. "You said the moon didn't have a back door, but maybe it has a front one. Madison thinks it should open for you." Cue she hadn't taken it off since. Outside the master bedroom, she heard the faint creak of floorboards and the unmistakable sound of Quinn muttering under his breath, as he tried to coax Madison into her dress shoes. Zaria padded barefoot into the hallway and leaned against the doorframe, watching them from a distance. Neither had noticed her yet. "You can't wear the sparkly sneakers," Quinn whispered, crouched in front of his daughter. "You promised Zaria you'd wear the nice ones." "But they pinch my toes," he sighed. "Can you at least keep them on through the ceremony? Only if I get 2 cupcakes instead of 1. Done." Zaria cleared her throat and both heads snapped toward her. Madison immediately beamed. "You look like a princess," she said, abandoning her shoes completely and racing toward her. Zaria knelt and caught her in a hug. "And you look like the fiercest flower girl in history." Madison held her face between her tiny hands. "Are you nervous?" Zaria shook her head. "Not even a little." Quinn stepped into view, rolling his sleeves down and fastening his cufflinks. "I'm the one sweating, and I'm not even the one in heels." Zaria stood slowly, her eyes sweeping over him. He wore a charcoal suit tailored, but not flashy, and a deep green tie she knew he'd only chosen because Madison insisted it brought out his eyes. He looked like himself, grounded, steady, and quietly strong. "Ready?" he asked. She nodded. "Let's go get married." The ceremony took place in the garden behind their house, beneath a canopy of wisteria that had bloomed just in time for spring. The backyard had been transformed with white linen chairs, soft music, and strings of glass lanterns suspended from the trees. There were no reporters, no board members, no pressure. Just friends, a few of Quinn's employees, and people who mattered. Layla stood beside Zaria, holding a small bouquet and grinning as if she'd orchestrated the entire event. Devin was already crying beside Quinn, dabbing his eyes with the same handkerchief he'd used to polish an engine 2 days ago. Madison stood between them, her dress puffed around her like a cloud, gripping a basket of petals with the gravity of someone carrying national secrets. When the officiant spoke, Zaria barely listened to the words. Her eyes stayed on Quinn's and everything else faded. "I didn't think I'd ever find this," she said softly when it was her turn. "Not because I didn't want it, but because I didn't think someone like me would ever be believed. You saw me before you saw anything else, and now I see the rest of my life when I look at you." Quinn's jaw flexed as he tried to speak. "I didn't know what kind of future I deserved," he said, voice rough, "but you gave me something better than anything I could have dreamed. You made room for me. And for Madison. And I swear I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret it." Madison tugged Zaria's hand right before they kissed. "You forgot to say the I do part." Zaria smiled without looking away from Quinn. "I absolutely do." Later that evening, the garden shimmered with candlelight and the scent of jasmine. Laughter echoed off the walls of the house as people danced. Children ran between tables, and empty plates piled up with the remains of grilled shrimp and lemon cake. Zaria sat at the edge of the patio, her heels kicked off, watching Quinn and Madison twirl under the lights. He wasn't a man who had ever looked for the spotlight. But she could see it now, how happiness softened the lines on his face, how fatherhood had carved a depth into him that nothing else could, how love had made him bold. She felt a warm pressure beside her and turned to find her father lowering himself into the chair next to hers. He rarely attended personal events, but today he had. "She loves him," he said without preamble. Zaria followed his gaze to Madison. "She does, and you." "I love both of them," she said. "In different, impossible ways." He nodded, then pulled a small envelope from his coat pocket and slid it across the table. "What's this?" "A deed," he said. "To the land next to the Inglued garage. I bought it 10 years ago, waiting for the right reason to let it go." "I think this is it." Zaria stared at the envelope. "You're serious?" "I'm not good with words, Zaria, but I know what matters." He stood slowly. "And I've never seen you look like this, ever." She didn't open the envelope. She didn't need to. Instead, she rose from her chair, crossed the patio, and reached for Quinn's hand. He turned mid-spin, catching her with a surprised laugh as Madison ran off toward the dessert table. "Hey," he said, pulling her in close. "You okay?" "I'm perfect," she said. "Dance with me." They swayed slowly as the music shifted to something softer, something that wrapped around them like heat. His hand rested at the small of her back, steady and warm, his breath brushing her temple. "This is real, right?" he murmured. "It's the most real thing I've ever had. You sure you want to keep both of us?" he teased gently. One of us throws glitter on everything and the other talks to cars. She leaned in, pressing her lips to his. I married you, didn't I? Later that night, after the guests had gone and Madison had fallen asleep between them with cupcake frosting still on her cheek, Zaria lay in bed with her head tucked under Quinn's chin. The window was open, and the garden light still glowed faintly in the distance. He traced soft circles over her shoulder, his voice low. What do we do now? She smiled into his chest. We build something, the three of us, something we don't have to protect, something we can just live inside of. He was quiet for a long moment. I never thought I'd be part of something permanent. You are now. She felt him nod against her hair. Outside, the breeze carried the scent of wisteria and lemon. Inside, the air was full of something gentler, something sacred. Love, earned and kept. Their story didn't end at the wedding. It began there, with a man who fixed things for a living, a woman who built empires alone, and a little girl who believed the moon had a front door. They opened it together and never looked back.